الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So we'll be continuing discussing the book Bulugh al-Maram, and today's session we'll be discussing Kitab al-Buyu. So we're still discussing those chapters that the author rahimahullah have mentioned here in relation to al-Buyu. So we'll be discussing matter in particular regarding Bab al-Riba, Bab that relates to interest or usury. And today inshallah ta'ala we'll be discussing another of those hadith that relates to this particular topic. So we'll read the hadith and then go through the explanation of the hadith as we'll normally do. Nam.
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Hadith 703, narrated Fadala bin Ubaid radiyallahu anhu قال, I brought a necklace for 12 dirham, for 12 dinar at the battle of Khaibar, and it contained gold and gems. I considered them separately and found that it was worth more than 12 dinar. I told the Prophet ﷺ about that, and he said, it must not be sold till the contents are considered separately. Reported by Muslim.
Now, so that's the hadith that the author rahimahullah have mentioned regarding matters pertaining to al-riba. So the hadith has been stated, and Fadala ibn Ubaid rata'ala, or Fadala ibn Ubaid rata'ala, so Fadala ibn Ubaid rata'ala anhu قال اشتريت يوم خيبر قلاد that ب12 دينار فيها ذهب وخرز وفصلتها فوجدت فيها أكثر من 12 دينارا فذكرت ذلك للنبي عليه السلام فقال لا تباع حتى تفصله. رواه مسلم. So that's the hadith that been mentioned here regarding the author rahimahullah Ibn Hajar on this topic regarding al-riba. So to give us another episode, another case regarding those transactions that might include al-riba, and what's the position of Islam regarding these type of transactions. So first of those things to be covered is the Sahabi that is mentioned here for the first time, who is Fadala ibn Ubaid. So Fadala ibn Ubaid. So Fadala ibn Ubaid. So he mentioned here regarding concerning that Fadala ibn Ubaid ibn Naqidh or Nafidh Ansari Umri al-Awsi. So that's concerning the Sahabi who's Fadala ibn Ubaid ibn Nafidh Ansari Umri Awsi. And he mentioned that Aslama Qadiman, that they mentioned that he accepted Islam in the early days, but Lam Yashad Badr, but did not participate in the battle of Badr. Then he mentioned Fashahid al-Uhud, but then he participated in the battle of Uhud, and then all the other battles that followed. So Uhud, he participated in the battle of Uhud, and then also he participated in the other battles that followed. And also of those who participated in Bay Tahta Shajara, of those involved concerning making of the that allegiance on the tree. Then I mentioned that also he participated in Fat Asham and Misr, that when those places opened to Islam, which is Asham and also Misr, then he decided, Fadala, to settle in Sham, and while in Sham, that he was appointed Waliya Qada, that he was took the position of being a Qadi, a judge in Damascus, in the city of Damascus, as it's called today. Ba'da Abi Darda. So after Abi Darda, that he was appointed and assumed this role as being a Qadi in Damascus. And mentioned that then mentioned Mata, as for when he passed away, rahimahullah ta'ala or ta'ala anhu, Mata fi khilafat Muawiyah. So during the reign of the years of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, ta'ala anhuma, that he that passed away during that time, fi sana thalatha wa khamseen, in the year, the 53rd year of al-Hijri, the 53rd year of the Hijri. And it mentioned that Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan that also involved in carrying off his sarir, that regarding concern is now involved in his burial. So that's concerning that particular Sahabi that had been mentioned for the first time, who's Fadala ibn Ubaid, that mentions something brief about him. Then the next thing that we'll cover is the next thing is takhrij of the hadith. Next thing, takhrij of the hadith. So as for this particular hadith that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, you have mentioned Rawahu Muslim. That hadith is narrated by Imam Muslim rahimahullah in his Sahih. So he only mentioned that single collector, Imam Muslim rahimahullah, in his collection of this hadith. But as for this particular hadith, that what have been mentioned regarding the source of the takhrij of the hadith, in brief, they mention akhrajahu, others have mentioned akhrajahu Muslim, as mentioned by the author, Abu Dawood, Nasa'i, Tirmidhi, Ahmed, Darakutni, Bayhaqi. So of those who have narrated this hadith with the same tariq ila Fadala, of those other than Imam Muslim, Abu Dawood, Nasa'i, Tirmidhi, Ahmed, Darakutni, wal Bayhaqi. So of those who have, so that's concerning of those who have transmitted also this hadith alongside with Imam Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala. Sheikh Mahir Al-Fahl, in his checking editing of the book Bulugh al-Maram, where he mentioned this hadith, he mentioned Rawahu Muslim, then he mentioned Hadith Sahih, he mentioned Akhrajahu Ahmed, Muslim, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Abu Awana, في مسنده, Tahawi, في شر مشكل, والبيهقي. So he mentioned these are also other sources of this hadith. Some of those sources, addition to what we have mentioned, most of what we have mentioned from those two sources, that they agree with some of those narrators, and also some mention others, some collection, some sources the other did not. So some they agree, and others, one may mention, other did not. Should I mention Ahmed, Imam Muslim, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Bayhaqi. Others mention Darakutni. Other mentioned Tahawi in his book Shar al-Mushkil, and also Abu Awana, So many who have narrated this particular hadith. So al-hadith, they mention hadith is sahih. So the next of those discussion, Sheikh Abdullah Fawzan, that he mentioned regarding concerning this particular hadith that have been mentioned here, regarding that this qilada, this like necklace that was bought in Khaibar, that they mentioned it consists of things of gold and something of other things, that they mentioned regarding concerning that in some narration regarding concerning the there's ittirab according to some, based upon how much was paid for this item. So they mentioned overall the hadith is authentic. The hadith is authentic, even though some mention a slight difference regarding what's the value of the necklace, the value of the necklace. So they mentioned, so that's concerning that hadith. Then they mentioned regarding concerning that the general meaning of hadith. So the general meaning of hadith. So they mentioned regarding that ishtaraytu yawm al-Khaybar. So I mean concerning ishtaraytu yawm al-Khaybar, after the battle of Khaybar, or during that time, that they mentioned that al-Khaybar, that of those battles, or Ghazawat al-Khaybar, that battle took place. So after this battle took place, that he bought of this item, this jewelry, this necklace. So that was regarding concerning that where I mentioned the Prophet after the Maraka, after this battle, that Taqsim al-Ghanaim, that the spoils of the war booty was distributed amongst the Muslim. So of those things that he purchased after the battle was this particular item. And this item that it consists of what they say gold and what else? And gems. Consists of golds. They mentioned like golds and gems, some like beads. So golds and gems. It consists of this necklace. And he gave the price that he purchased the item for. Then he mentioned that then he fossil, then he separate between the gold and the gems. Then the Prophet ﷺ told him that, for him to sell this item, then he has to sell them separate. The golds and the gems. Sell them separate. So I mentioned, فَصَلْتُهَا, that when I mentioned that I separate between the gold and also the gem after he had purchased this item. So the Shaykh then mentioned that with this particular hadith, that it discusses a matter amongst the ulama regarding a certain type of transaction that will be discussed regarding concerning that a certain type of transaction that is the form of riba or not a form of riba, or is allowed or not allowed, that to be discussed. So as we mentioned before, that Khaibar is that a Medina Kabir, that's like a city that is Kabir, but is known to be a farming area. So it's known to be like a farming area, and away from Medina, about 160 something kilo from away from Medina. But the Prophet said that a lot of farming area regarding this particular place. So the Prophet said that in the mentioned regarding concern that I saw the 70 of the Hijrah regarding the Prophet ﷺ went out regarding this era regarding Khaibar. So overall he mentioned that after the battle of Khaibar that he purchased this item. So the Shaykh mentioned that of the things that can be taken from the hadith, that I mentioned that after the points from this hadith دليل على أنه لا يجوز البيع الذهب ومعه غيره بالذهب إلا بعد أن نزع الذهب وتمييزه عن غيره. So he mentioned regarding concern that الذهب, because ذهب is of those items that are considered to be an item of riba, that it at times can it be sold with something else. Can ذهب, so they mentioned that this necklace, it had gold and gems. So the ulama says because of gold being of those items which is of riba, can it be sold with something else together, or it has to be sold separate? So the gold has to be sold separate from that other thing that it is together with. So that's the discussion between the ulama. You have that discussion. So they said from this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ instructed that they are not to be sold together, but to be sold separately. The gold by itself and also the other thing by itself, not together as gold should. So you have that discussion between the ulama. They mentioned concerning tafadul, regarding concern that of two of those things that they are different. So of the ulama who go regarding concern that is it allowed for one to sell gold along with something else, that for example in this case this type of which is gems, are they allowed to be sold together? As I mentioned that both they fall in the same category of being items which there's some I said that outside riba are items of value, precious stones. So on this matter, you have a khilaf between the ulama, as the Shaykh mentioned that, of the ulama who mentioned that based upon this hadith, that is not allowed to be done. They have to be sold separately. Gold by itself and the precious by itself. Where gold will be sold by its weight with gold also. So if you're going to use gold to buy gold, then you have to go that process. Gold with the same weight, and also the exchange occur at the same time. So on this matter, that's concerning that where I mentioned that hadith the Prophet ﷺ said in this hadith also that in Muslim, another wording to the hadith, I mentioned that it called, where the narrator mentioned قال سمعت رسول عليه السلام يقول من كان يؤمن بالله that the one who believes in Allah واليوم الآخر and the last day فلا يأخذن إلا مثلا بمثل, that meaning concerning now gold is to be sold equally, the same amount. They have to be sold and to be taken together. So have to be, the exchange have to occur, and both have to be of equal weight, as we had covered before. So they mention regarding those matters that fall under what is said to be a riba item. A khilaf, as we had mentioned before, between the ulama, that they mentioned there are 6 categories of items. Is things, for example, gold and silver being of those renowned ones. But will other precious metal, diamonds, ruby, fall under the same thing as gold and silver? Some who say no, and so some who say yes. So anything which is similar in that category, then the same applies to them regarding riba or not. But as we had mentioned before, you have that discussion between the ulama. So they mentioned regarding, in this case, you have this gold and gems that of those who mentioned that the second view, that it's allowed for them to be sold if they're mukhtalit, if they're like mixed together. They're together. So they're mixed. So in this, so they are together, then they can be done, can be done. But they make a stipulation of those who mentioned that, and for example, like this necklace, that the item that is with gold, it has to be of less in its amount, less than a third of the weight of the gold, or the amount of gold. It has to be in amount less than a third of gold. So they put that stipulation. I mentioned that so the gold by itself, and that other thing has to be a third or less than the amount of gold of that item. So they mentioned it cannot be equal to gold or above that of a third of the amount of gold. And I mentioned that a qawl that is taken by Imam Abu Hanifa, or a qawl of the Hanafiya. And I mentioned here Sheikh Abdullah Fawzan, Qarib Minhu Rahi, Ibn Taymiyyah. And also Ibn Taymiyyah is slightly inclined towards that view, is close to that view, regarding that it can be done, gold and that gem is sold together, but the gold should be more than the value of, or more of the weight than that of that other item, and that item has to be a third or less. It has to be a third or less. So if the gold is less, then no. They say no. If gold is less or equal, no, they cannot be sold together. The third opinion, then the next of the third opinion the Shaykh mentioned, Jawaz ذلك. Then the next view that said it's allowed. So yes, they mentioned that this view again concerned that view that that items, it has to be again concerned has to be less, and that's the view that is also the Maliki, and the Maliki are the ones who mentioned it has to be a third or less. And as for the so the Maliki said it has to be a third and less. The Hanafi has to be less, but not similar, but it has to be less. But it cannot be similar, but the other item has to be less, without stipulating whether it is a third or less. But as for the Maliki, then they stipulate it should be a third or less. The other item has to be in amount a third in amount or less than that of the gold. That's concerning the Maliki. And they mentioned regarding concern that it can be sold together. By way of, they mentioned a person was said a sword that have decoration that has with gold on it. Then they mentioned that that is something which is allowed But we say with the condition of the Malikiya that the other thing have to be a third or less. A fourth opinion, وهو جواز, that is allowed, بيع, that this type of transaction is allowed, بالذهب, something being sold with gold together, مطلقا, in general, without any, so without it, whether that thing is equal to the gold or less or more, it can be done. So gold with those precious stones can be sold together, or with something that can be sold together. They mentioned that view, the fourth view of Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman. They mentioned that view is somewhat with gold in totally contradiction to the Hadith. That opinion that it goes in contrary to the Hadith, and either the excuse that Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman, that he was not aware of the Hadith. As that view, it's in contrary to what is mentioned by the Hadith. So you have those aqwal. So the Shaykh, he mentioned here that, according to Shaykh, he mentioned that what he sees as the qawl al-rajih in this matter, qawl awwal, that the first opinion, that this type of transaction, gold with something else, is not allowed. So fidda would fall, he means that silver will fall on the same thing, will fall on the same thing, unless they are separated. Where separated, know the value of each, know the value or the weight of each. And they mentioned that this type of matter is within what is discussed between the fuqaha as a matter that on the category of riba, or this type of transaction is referred to as mud ajwa. Mud ajwa. So mud ajwa. So mud is like a measurement of a sa'. So according to them, that measurement of that time, so a form of measurement or amount of a measurement, and ajwa is a type of dates. So they mentioned regarding concern as not mud. So in this case, regarding, for example, the Fuqaha mentioned that on this matter, that is this transaction, they discuss it regarding concerning that. For example, this type of transaction, they fall under a different category, that of a person, item is said to be riba. The person who wants to do a transaction, we have tamar. A person have a transaction regarding tamar. So one person come with, for example, in English, we said in our measurement, he has 5 kg of tamar. And he wants to sell this with tamar. Then it has to be 5 kg. So the tamar has to be equal. So if one is more or less than the other, then that becomes riba. Because the transaction that is taking place, the items, both items that are being used is the same. Tamar with tamar. So whether this one tamar is of a higher value or said of a higher type compared to the other, then they still have to be of the same weight. So I have to look at mainly, so in that matter regarding for it not to fall into riba, that has to be of the same measurement, not per se that the actual value, one concerning its value may be higher because of a certain standard, a certain type, that consider be of a more higher category or higher class of dates. The fact that you exchange it tamar with tamar, they have to be of the same amount, the same measurement. So they mentioned a person come with want to sell his tamar. It's of 5 kg, plus also he has 5 kg he wants to exchange, and another person wants to get his tamar, but he has 3 kg and 20 pounds, $20, 20 riyal. So one person have 5 kg of tamar, person B have 3 kg less in tamar, but he has with it 20 pounds, 20 riyal, $20. Can that exchange take place? So of the ulama all that, he can. of those who mentioned that in that case it can, amongst the ulama, where they mentioned that it will be as so it said that will kind of somewhat, they said that it some give permissibility of this type of transaction. So they mentioned that reason being of those who give permissibility that the 3 kg will cancel out the 3 from the person with 5, and the £20 will be for the payment of the other 5 kg that remain. واضح? So that they'll see it in that fashion. They'll see it as in that manner. So they said that type of transaction is something with them that is can take place. Can take place. Then I mentioned, for example, that the person who comes with so if a person comes with 5 kg of tamar, dates, and he wants to buy his tamar with another person come with 5 kg plus 10 riyal, 10 pounds. The other person comes one of 5 kg of tamar, and the other person of 5 kg of tamar plus 10 pounds. Then that is riba. That becomes riba. So that's concerning those matters they discussed regarding this particular masala. So they mentioned that regarding concerning the overall that on this matter that some of those items at time need to be removed or separated, and each are sold separately. As they discuss certain items, if they're combined together, will it fall into riba? If there's a difference, then we have kind of somewhat mentioned at times it could fall into riba, and at times the ulama give a permissibility depending on how it is balanced out. How it is balanced out. So we mentioned the case regarding how it is balanced out. One of certain amount of 5 kg of tamar, the other person have 4 kg of tamar, but also 20 pounds. So they mentioned in that case it will somewhat balance out, where the 4 will cancel the other 4, and the other remaining 1 it will be purchased. It will seem as being purchased for the 10 pounds. So that inshallah ta'ala, some of those matters that they discuss regarding being clear regarding the different ways of riba. A riba tafadul, where things that they have to be separated and each treated separately. So that inshallah ta'ala will end this discussion. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخرة والحمد لله آمين. How long is that one?